Oh my God. Hello, my fam. Perez here, the queen of all media, the original influencer, and your number one source for everything It Ends With Us saga. Now, you need to pay attention here, okay? Because there's a lot of backstory and a lot of moving pieces. Back in December of 2024, the very first lawsuit to be filed was Stephanie Jones against Justin Baldoni and the Wayfarer parties. Stephanie Jones is his former publicist, the one who used to employ his current publicist, Jen Abel. The one who fired Jen Abel after she found out that Jen was leaving to start her own PR company. Stephanie sued Baldoni and Wayfarer for breach of contract and other allegations. And when she fired Jen Abel, Stephanie Jones retained her laptop and cell phone. And it was Jen Abel's text messages that formed the crux of the New York Times hit piece against Justin Baldoni. Text messages that were cherry-picked and taken out of context, according to Baldoni's lawyer, Brian Friedman, who is also my attorney. Well, now Jen Abel has answered Stephanie Jones's complaint and added new allegations in her counterclaims. And whenever you think we've heard it all, this telenovela keeps feeding us. And this is delicious. But before we get into the response and counterclaims, I need to remind you all, last week I told you all about the sham lawsuit that the Van Zandt CEO filed. It was a fishing expedition. But not just that, we are now finding out the other layer of the Van Zandt sham lawsuit. I knew there was more to this. I knew it. Why? Because I'm good and I've read everything. When I told you about the Van Zandt sham lawsuit, the fishing expedition, something didn't quite add up. Because, as Justin Baldoni mentioned in his first amended complaint, the very same day that Stephanie Jones fired Jen Abel, she, on that same day, shared texts and information with Team Lively. And Delulu's publicist, Leslie Sloan, who is also being sued by Baldoni, called incensed his crisis PR expert, Melissa Nathan. She told Melissa that she had seen the text messages from Jen Abel and to prepare to get sued. However, Stephanie Jones has been trying to rewrite history over the last couple of months, saying that she only shared the text messages with the New York Times because she was subpoenaed. So the Van Zandt lawsuit, which was filed as a DOE or DOE, he and the other parties were not mentioned in that lawsuit. That afforded the Empress of Empty Allegations to file subpoenas and cover herself. And also cover Stephanie Jones. And also cover the New York Times. What his lawyer has just done masterfully is he has painted a clear picture of the scheming and smear campaign that Team Lively did in collaboration with Stephanie Jones and the New York Times. What do you mean, Perez? Well, directly addressing the Van Zandt sham lawsuit, Baldoni's legal team says, quote, "The Lively parties likely anticipated or were told directly that the New York Times would not traffic in stolen communications under these circumstances and needed the color of law. Jones and Jones Works, for their part, wanted to insulate themselves from legal exposure to Wayfarer for breaches of confidentiality. Hence the sham lawsuit that they had no intention of winning. It wasn't about that. It was all about just getting the subpoena for the text messages, the receipts. Receipts. But remember the timeline. Jen Abel was fired in August. In August, Stephanie Jones shared communications of Jen Abel's with Leslie Sloan, the Gossip Girl alum's publicist. The subpoena was not served until October. What was Stephanie Jones' reasoning for sharing stolen texts and information back in August? There was no subpoena in August. Another bombshell claim in this counterclaim and response is, quote, the same day the lawsuit was filed, September 27th, 2024, Stephanie Jones warned a departing employee not to work for Abel and her new company because, quote, her business wouldn't be around much longer. What? I just noticed I had food here. A pickle. Yum. How will Stephanie Jones explain that? The latest filing goes on to say, once the lawsuit was filed, the Lively parties used it to issue a subpoena to Jones Works for all data stored on Abel's phone, including private communications from her iCloud and email accounts, as well as potentially privileged information. Since there were no identifiable parties and no party had been served, the subpoenas were issued without notice, depriving Abel of any knowledge of the subpoena, much less the opportunity to object. Now, here comes an even bigger bombshell. What Abel could not foresee was that Jones and Jones Works' gross invasion of her privacy would not stop upon her departure. In fact, it escalated. Jones and Jones Works retained access to Abel's iCloud for multiple months thereafter, monitoring and intercepting her private communications in real time. Abel was under the mistaken impression that by switching phone numbers, she had cut off Jones and Jones Works' access to her text exchanges. Not so. In fact, Abel's text messages were tied to her iCloud, not her phone number, until Abel changed her iCloud password in January of this year, September, October, November, December, 5 months after being fired, until Abel changed her iCloud password in January 2025 for unrelated reasons. Jones had been intercepting and monitoring all of her text exchanges, including not only with her clients, fiancé, doctors, parents, and friends, but also with the undersigned counsel. Indeed, the intrusion ceased only by happenstance during the pendency of this litigation. And Ryan Reynolds does not come out unscathed in this either. The plantation princess's husband was not just a bystander here, he was a very involved party, according to this latest filing. He last year got access to all of Jen Abel's communications and used that to conspire with his wife, the publicist Leslie Sloan, and together to orchestrate a smear campaign against him. Y'all, this is so crazy, and I love it. Thank you for feeding, nourishing. I'm almost speechless, but hopefully you are not. Let's discuss this all in the comments section.